Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be looking at the 2022 Georgia and Pennsylvania early vote numbers because I think these are the two states with the most data reporting besides Florida, but Florida is not really competitive this year, as we know. So let's talk about these states because, again, it is that time of year. It's always really fun. We have, early vote data to analyze and look at, but let's get into it here. Let's talk about what we're looking at in Georgia and Pennsylvania. So the first thing I want to say is that it is very hard to predict solely off early vote data. We have priors, we have things, we have benchmarks we're expecting, we have, variables that we think are coming into play and whatnot. But looking at like exclusively early vote data, very difficult, very, very difficult to, forecast for that and only based off that. Now, what we can do is we can, use our past knowledge and apply it to the present to see what the elections are going to look like. Because again, early votes will not tell you what percent of voters voted for Raphael Warnock and what percent of voters voted for Herschel Walker. Early votes will tell you what percentage of the voters are black, white, age 65 plus, women, men, right? We know all of that, and we can make, we can use our knowledge about those demographics to predict the electorate that's going to show up on election day and to predict ultimately how that electorate is going to vote. Because again, doesn't tell us outright, but we can make guesses by looking at 2020 data, exit polls, whatnot. So we're just going to do that today. So we'll start with Georgia. We're going to get right into it here. Georgia's looking pretty good for Democrats right now. So the black vote as it stands today is 31.4% of the electorate, and that is higher than 2020. In 2020, Biden won Georgia with the electorate being 29% black, which actually isn't great for him. Like the only reason he did decently well was able to win Georgia was because the white voters were a bit more friendly to him than expected, or than I think a lot of people expected, which is why he was obviously able to win it. But Georgia is interesting because Democrats kind of have they try to go 30-30, right? They try to get black voters to be 30% of the electorate, and they try to crack 30 with white voters. So Biden cracked 30 with white voters. Black voters were, I think, 29.4, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it was he was close, but he only won by 0.2%. So it was still really close, and I think Democrats would have been a bit happier if they got that 30% figure with black voters. But luckily for them, they ended up doing that. And the runoffs, as we know, black voters made up a little over 30% of the electorate. It's spiked, obviously, and Ossoff and Warnock didn't lose meaningful amounts of votes with white voters, and that's why they were able to win those runoffs, despite the fact that they were originally underdogs heading into them. So that is, I think, the first and foremost, that's the most important thing I would say for these voters, or I think specifically for the voters, but also for people trying to predict the election, because again, we don't correlate party registration in Georgia. We correlate race, and as we know, black voters were 94% for Warnock in 2021, and they're likely to be strong for him again. The higher black turnout is, the better for Warnock, and so him sitting a point and a half ahead of where he was in 2021 is really good for him, because again, he won by 2 points in 2021, and if he's running a point and a half ahead of where he was at that point in 2021, really good for him. And so again, unless he totally collapses with white voters, this is a winning number. Obviously, I think every Democrat in Georgia would take walking into election day with that 31.4% number. Like, you can say it's going to decline. You can say, we're going to see where we're at. But right now, the fact of the matter is Democrats are outpacing their 2021 numbers with black voters. And that's, that's pretty good for them, especially when you consider the fact that unlike 2021 and 2020, we're likely to see a less polarized environment in terms of, or not environment, I should say, but, less polarized state or status of people requesting mail-in ballots or voting early. Because again, in 2020, 2021, most Democrats voted early or sent mail-in ballots, whereas most Republicans voted on election day. And I think that that dynamic still exists to an extent, but it's a lot less polarized. And I think there are going to be a lot more Democrats voting in person on election day, especially in a state like Georgia, where, as we saw in 2021, a lot of Democrats were surprised by how well they did on election day with their turnout in the city of Atlanta. So that's all to keep in mind. But I think not to overcomplicate it, let's just look at the black number, and that's kind of the best example of where we're at. And right now, black voters are outpacing 2020 by a lot, outpacing 2021 by a fair amount, and that's a winning number for Raphael Warnock. It's a winning recipe for him. I think he's going to do quite well in the Atlanta suburbs. Obviously, I think already he was in a good spot, but this kind of corroborates what I was thinking, right? This is not over. Walker can still absolutely overcome this, but he's not getting most Republicans are wishing for low black turnout, and they're not getting that right now. So Georgia, I think pretty clear to me at this point that Raphael Warnock is favored to win, and that these numbers are quite good for him in the Democratic Party. Now, let's talk about Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, we know, very competitive Senate race there between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. Governor's race, I think, is a bit less contested. I'm pretty confident Shapiro's going to win, but it's still going to be interesting. We still have obviously some down ballot races like, Pennsylvania 17, Pennsylvania 7, Pennsylvania 8, competitive races there. So Pennsylvania is going to be really interesting to watch for sure in November. Now, let's talk about our early vote there. So right now, Democrats make up 73% of ballots returned. So again, it's a massive firewall, and they lead by, nearly 370,000. Republicans make up 19%, and then, no party affiliated / libertarians or registered Greens or whatever, a little under 8%. So that is a good lead for Democrats. It's a healthy lead that, they're netting votes by the day. And again, in 2020, I believe they walked into the election with a lead of about 1 million ballots. Again, Biden, I think, had Democrats turned in 1.6 million, Republicans turned, 650K, I want to say, is maybe a little under 1 million, something like that. And so what happened was, like, obviously that was like kind of like the winning number, barely, because Biden won Pennsylvania by a little under 81,000 votes here. And so again, you could say Democrats could have, that had that 80,000 vote margin of error. So, call it a 920, 930K lead, the winning number for Democrats in 2020. In 2022 is going to be a lot less for them, right? Because as we know, midterm turnouts tend to be a lot smaller than presidential turnouts. And as we know, Republicans are less likely to turn out on election day for Oz and Mastriano than they were for Trump in 2020. We know that. So again, like, say in 2020, just as an example, I want to say 160 million people voted in 2020. And then in the 2018 midterms, we had 110 million. So 11 over 16 is, I want to say, like, I'm bad at math like that, but, just quickly, 10 over 16 is going to be 5/6. So let's just say, or not 5/6, geez, what am I saying? 5/8. So let's just say, call it, I want to say 60-something% turnout, mid-60s turnout. And I think this midterm will be a bit higher turnout. So call it a 70% turnout election relative to 2020. Again, very quick math, and I'm sure I made a lot of errors there. But like if you did 70% of a 930K firewall, that's, I just did it on a calculator, that's roughly 650,000 votes you'd be wanting. Add the fact that, Democrats or Republicans are less likely to vote on election day to come out as a share of the electorate on election day than they were in 2020. Maybe that's worth hundreds of thousands of votes. Let's just call it 450, 500K firewall to, win Pennsylvania. Democrats are already close to that. Like, 450K firewall, Democrats are already close to that. And they only, they haven't even returned 55% of their ballots. Right now, they've turned in 54% of their ballots, right? A little under that. They have a lot more to go. And in 2020, they returned 87% of their ballots. And so this time, I think if we assume a similar amount, Democrats are on track to build that firewall. Now, again, that was a lot of quick math, making a lot of assumptions about a lot of turnout in electorate things. And I know I might not have done a great job explaining that. But, the point I was making there is that Democrats need maybe a 400 to 5, call it a big range, 400 to 600K vote lead, right? And right now they're already close to that. And again, they've only turned in about half their ballots. And I think already you can take away Democrats are doing pretty well, even if you say, there's a long way to go, but like Democrats are already doing pretty well. Because again, they have returned 54% of their ballots, Republicans at 49%. So that's pretty good for them. If you look at the return rate from younger voters, it's also quite good for Democrats, 27%. That's usually pretty high. And then if you look at the return rate for some of these counties that are, we'll look at the important ones, they also look pretty good for the Democrats. Allegheny County, again, this is Pittsburgh. This is John Fetterman's home base, 58% return rate. Talk about Buck County. This is a swing county that tends to lean Democrat, 56%. So swing county is turning out pretty large as well. But again, Allegheny, most important county one of the more important counties for Fetterman. That's 58%. Let's look. We'll look at Chester. This is a big Democratic county, pretty suburban. 36% of ballots returned, but again, we haven't seen a ton of ballots requested there. Delaware County. This is again a big Democratic county. 35% of votes turned in there. That's more Shapiro territory. Again, Fetterman's going to do pretty well in Pittsburgh. Shapiro's going to do better in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Lackawanna County. I wonder what page that'll be on. Lackawanna, 63%. That's really high. Or 62%. That's just really high for the Democrats. And again, this is big. This is big blue territory. This is where Scranton is. And then of course Philadelphia. That's the big question. Right? Philadelphia, 44.4% return rate. That's a lot of ballots in Philadelphia I know haven't even been mailed out yet. So right now, I think Pennsylvania Democrats should be pretty happy about where they're at. Again, there's a lot of things going on here, and I think it's really complicated to analyze, which is why I might not be the best at explaining it. But look, Democrats in their counties are outpacing Republicans. Statewide, Democrats are having a higher return rate despite the fact that they have a lot more ballots, which is, again, hard to do in general. And we also know for a fact the Democrats are well on their way to building up a firewall of what did I call it, 400 to 600K votes, and they're already almost like they have a right now, like if it all ended today, Democrats would have a lead of 370K, and so they're already really close to the bottom edge of that firewall. We still have weeks to go, 10, 12 days to go of early voting. So, or no, I think maybe 14 or 15. We have a while to go, and Democrats are already on track to build up that firewall. Now, things can change. Democrats might just stop turning their ballots as much as I'm expecting, or as much as the rate would be expecting, right? We know this is hard to predict, and predicting predicting elections is hard enough. Predicting ballot return rates is even harder, right? But what I will say is that right now, I think Democrats are meeting where they're at in Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know for a fact how Josh Shapiro or John Fetterman are feeling about this specifically, and I don't know how Doug Mastriano and how Dr. Oz are feeling right now. But look, it is pretty clear to me that at this point, Democrats should be pretty happy with where they're at in Pennsylvania. It's far from over, still a toss-up race, especially in the Senate. But I think this is, these are winning numbers right here. Winning numbers. So I'll stick with that. Same with Georgia. Obviously, these are winning numbers, but a while to go. So thank you for listening and watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and turn on post notifications. That's that bell right next to the red subscribe button so that you don't miss an update. I'll be posting every day until the election. Comment down below what you think. Do you think Warnock, Fetterman, Shapiro, Abrams on track to victory? Or do you think it's going to be Walker, Dr. Oz, Mastriano, Kemp? We're going to have to see. So, again, always appreciate the listening, and have a good rest of your day.